The backyard was ready. Folding tables, paper plates, streamers taped to the fence. Parents gathered under the maple and compared weekends. The twins, Rebecca and Rachel, moved in a loose orbit of cousins and classmates. Rebecca wore a paper crown already creased from being put on and taken off. Rachel kept touching the hem of her dress as if checking that it still fit. Their father stayed in motion. Cooler, cake knife, trash bag, while keeping them in sight. The clown arrived a few minutes late with a hand truck and a wheeled trunk. He introduced himself as Mr. Merriweather. The name sounded rehearsed. He wore a faded red suit with white gloves and a painted smile that didn't match his eyes. He set up a small frame on the grass and clipped a rectangle of velvet across it to make a simple curtain. From the trunk, he took a shoebox of scarves, a set of metal rings, and a laminated name card that he had propped on a music stand. The crowd of children drew closer. The adults relaxed a notch. A professional had taken the floor, such as it was. "Who's ready for magic?" he asked. The speaker popped. A few kids shouted. The twins stood shoulder to shoulder. Their father felt the predictable rise of attention in the yard. He stepped closer to the group without looking like he was getting closer. Mr. Merriweather started with easy things. A coin behind a boy's ear, ribbons pawned from his sleeves, the rings clattered together and came apart. The jokes were mild. He kept the pace steady. Parents smiled because the children smiled. Their father watched the hands, the pockets, the way the clown placed his feet. Stagecraft leaves seams, though, if you look long enough, but he found that none of that mattered. Cake time was held until after the big trick. The clown asked the twins to stand in front of the curtain so everyone could sing. Rebecca liked being first. Rachel checked her father and then nodded. "Now, for the birthday girls, a special illusion. Who wants to disappear?" A kid shouted, "Me." The clown laughed and shook his head. "Only on their day." He lifted the curtain by a cord. The fabric hung fine and still. He invited the twins to step behind it and hold hands. They did. The father felt his chest tighten. Not from fear, but from the small pride that comes when children do something together without a push. From the lawn, the setup looked ordinary. The curtain was clipped to a simple pull frame. There was nothing behind it but the side of the garage and an extension cord. The father knew that, because he had mowed there this morning and coiled the cord himself. Still, standing a few feet away, he noticed a detail that the others did not. A change in the light that wasn't the same shade as the rest of the yard. It had its own temperature. He didn't have words for it. Mr. Merriweather spoke to the crowd in a smooth rhythm. "On 3, we all clap. 1, 2... The children giggled, hands lifted. The father took another step forward. 3... Applause broke across the yard. The curtain dropped, and the clown swept it aside. The twins were gone. For a beat, everyone did what crowds do. They decided they were seeing what they had been told they would see. A few parents laughed. The boys shouted, "Where'd they go?" The clown said, "Wait for it," and held the curtain up again like a waiter revealing a dish. He glanced past the fabric toward the father, and the glance had weight. It wasn't part of the act. The father pushed through the half circle of kids and reached the curtain. Up close, the wrongness sharpened. The space beyond the fabric wasn't the side of the garage. It ran away from gray and flat to a crooked line that looked like a far shoreline. The air moving out of it smelled of salt and iron. The hair along his forearms lifted. "Sir, please step back," the clown said softly. "Where are my daughters?" "It's almost time," the clown said for the crowd, louder. As if answering a different question, he let the curtain fall and the rectangle went dull. The yard came back. Children bounced on their toes. The father kept his hand on the fabric. The clown raised it again. The gray distance returned. This time the father heard a slow wash. Not wind, not a speaker hiss, but the sound of water. He looked over his shoulder at the guests, at the cake, at the women under the maple, at the open gate. He knew that if he turned to explain anything, people would move toward him and the moment would close. He put 2 fingers under the curtain and lifted it himself. The clown's smile faltered. The father saw nothing of the garage. He saw a barren strand under a dead sky. "Rebecca! Rachel!" He called into the opening. No answer came back. The sound of his voice stretched thin and wrong. "Dad?" someone said behind him. He didn't look to see who. He let the curtain fall, and the yard returned again, as if on a switch. "And now for the finale," the clown said, and spread his arms as if the timing were perfect. A few parents clapped because the cue was clear. One mother reached for her phone with a shaking hand and missed the screen twice. Children drifted closer to the empty space, waiting for the next part. The father lifted the curtain one more time and saw that barren shoreline and knew deep down he only had seconds. He dove in. He dove into the curtain and into the shore. The father fell. The air took him and spun once. His stomach rose and then settled. He felt the grit of sand against his palms and the sting of salt in his nose. He rolled to his side and looked up at a sky the color of wet stone. There was no garage. There were no voices. There was only a long shore and the sound of water working at it, regular and patient. He got to his knees and called their names again. The sound traveled and lost itself. He stood. He picked a direction and ran. He hit the ground and knew at once the place was wrong. Gray sky, flat light, a shore that went on without color. The sea pushed in and out with a steady sound. No birds, no bugs, no voices. He stood and called for his daughters until his throat hurt. Nothing answered. He picked a direction and walked. He kept to the edge where wet sand met dry so his feet had grip. He chose fixed points to keep himself honest. A broken piling, a slab with old bolts, a length of rope turned hard with salt. Far off, a fallen wheel lay on its side. There was no sun or shadow to mark time. He found signs and forced himself not to rush. Near a pool, he saw small prints set hard in mud, heel and toe, short steps. They ran to stone and vanished. A few hours later, his best guess, he found a pink ribbon caught in dead grass. He washed it in a puddle. The color came back. He put it in his pocket. On the next day, by his count, he found a strip torn from a dress hem tied into a loop. Later still, longer prints crossed the beach at an angle. Boot tread over lighter steps. The steps had stretched over time. He followed the line until it broke on rock. He built a windbreak from driftwood and a torn piece of canvas. He learned which shells would open on stone and how to guard a small flame with his body until it caught. He spoke out loud at night to keep silence from filling his head. He told himself simple things. School drop-offs, a loose tooth, a recipe gone wrong. He promised he would find them, no matter how long it took. He promised one thing he could keep. He would not stop. Days later, the tide pulled back far and held. The air felt thin. He didn't like times like this here. A week had passed, and on his 7th day, 3 men came off the flats. One had a chain. The other had a knife ground from an old blade. The third carried nothing and watched. Their faces had the look of people who lived on other people's luck. "Don't run. It goes worse if you run." The father lifted his hands and stepped to himself on an angle in the chain. He let them see his empty pockets, but it didn't matter. The knife man came in and shoved him. The watcher moved behind him to close the space. "Empty him. Everything," the man with the knife said. They found the spare birthday candle and they laughed. They pulled the ribbon from his pocket and tossed it. He bent to grab it and the chain hit his shoulder and wrapped around. He went to his knee. The knife man drove the blade toward his ribs. The father caught his wrist and turned it away. The blade caught his palm and he lost it in the sand. The chain hit again and took his breath. The watcher stomped on his hand until his fingers went numb. "Hold him. He'll kick," the watcher said. They leaned in to finish. The chain lifted. The father thought, clear and plain, "I have to stand up." But he couldn't. His knee locked. An arrow hit the chain man through the back and through his chest. He dropped the iron and stumbled. A second arrow broke the knife man's cheeks and sent him sideways. The watcher turned to run, and a third arrow struck him low in his spine. He fell forward and crawled without moving his legs. "Hold," a woman's voice called. "Check the flats." Two figures came in fast and careful. They wore layered feather and salt-stiff cloaks. Both had bows. The taller kept her arrow in the father as she closed. The other scanned the ground, eyes sharp, arrow knocked. "Hands where we can see them," the tall one said. He put his palms in the sand. He kept still. He watched their faces. The shorter one turned, and he saw her fully. Older than 8. Old enough to have learned hard lessons. Probably 18 by the looks of it. But the eyes... The eyes were Rachel's. The mouth on the archer was Rebecca's. The shapes had changed with years, but he could tell. "Rebecca, wait," the shorter one said. The archer held her draw one more beat, then eased the string. She did not lower the bow. The shorter one came to him and checked his hands and the cut at his knee. Her touch was quick and steady. "It's him. Look at his left ear." The archer looked. "I remember giving Dad that scar. He tripped running after me and sliced it on the open glass countertop." He forced the words to a dry throat. "Rebecca? Rachel?" They heard their names and looked at each other. Rebecca let her shoulders drop a fraction. Rachel took a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. "Stand. Slow. Don't make too much noise." He stood. His knee steadied. Rachel slid under his arm without asking. She was light and strong. She smelled of salt and old smoke. He wanted to pull her close, but he didn't. She kept a hand free for the bow. They moved to the shadow of the fallen wheel. Rebecca went back for her arrows, pulled them free, wiped them clean, and broke the bent one to save the head. On the way back, she picked up the ribbon and handed it to Rachel. Rachel tied it around her wrist and kept watch. "How long?" he asked. He meant in this place. He meant without him. Rebecca kept numbers out of it. "Since the curtain, since the party? We stopped counting." Rachel met his eyes. "We were 8. We aren't anymore." How long was it for you?" "5 seconds, he said. Rebecca let out one short breath. They made a small camp where the wind dropped. Rachel cleaned his knee and wrapped it. She gave him a drink from a skin and watched him take it slow. Rebecca sat where she could watch the flats and the water at the same time. "There are seams, spots where the air goes thin. Sometimes they open. We don't know what they are, but they're always guarded by demons and ghouls and worse. Almost as if they're gates that are guarded because they leave out of here. But we've never had the courage to try. We come back here, Rebecca said, nodding at the wheel ribs. This feels like where we stood first. I saw the yard before I stepped. The maple, the tables, I smelled salt. It was open. I lifted the curtain and went through. When? After you vanished? The clown lifted the curtain again, and I lifted it after him. Rebecca looked at the timeline. We need to wait for the next seam to open. They rested in turns. He slept and woke to the same gray. The father had pulled back far, showing slick flats. The air had that thin note that made his teeth feel wrong. Ebb, Rebecca said. She stood and drew her bow. They stepped into a shallow dip between two ribs. Rachel drew a circle in the damp sand with an arrow tip. Stand here when it thins, she said. Figures moved along the upper beach, more than one, slow and sure. People who thought a door would open and soon wanted a claim on it. The air thinned more. The sea's sound shifted. Gray ahead of them dented and held. He smelled grass, sugar, plastic tablecloths. He saw red for a heartbeat. He heard a microphone pop. He felt the spare candle in his pocket and the ribbon on Rachel's wrist. Ready, Rebecca said. If it's home, we go, Rachel said. It is home. He had to be the first to say it. He set his feet, kept his daughters close, and waited for the thin place to open. The seam shivered. Figures on the upper beach broke into a run. 4 men and a woman, all with the look of scavengers who had learned where doors might open. 2 carried hooks on ropes. 1 had a machete. 1 had a pipe with nails welded along the end. The woman held a short spear and moved like she had used it before. They didn't wait to be surrounded. Rebecca put an arrow through the first man's throat before he cleared the rocks. Rachel shot the woman in the thigh and then the chest, and when she didn't stop, again. The nail pipe swung at the father's head. He ducked, took a glancing hit to the shoulder, and drove his shoulder into the attacker's midsection. The man folded. The father took the pipe and brought it down twice. The machete came in from the right. Rachel stepped in, parried with the bow like a staff, and Rebecca's next arrow ended it. They kept running towards the seam. 2 more, Rebecca said without looking away from the ridge. The last pair hesitated. They had expected easy prey. The one with the hook threw it for ankles. The father jumped it, grabbed the rope, and yanked. The man stumbled forward and Rebecca shot him clean. The last raider stopped, hands up, mouth open as if he could find a price to name. He glanced past them at the seam. He started to kneel and Rachel's arrow went through his eye. She didn't say anything after. The father looked at his daughters in disbelief. He couldn't believe the price they had to pay for coming here, for how they had changed. Clear, Rebecca said. She checked the flats. No more shapes. The air over the circle thinned to nothing you could point at and still feel. The sound of the sea shifted, like an engine changing gears. The gray dented inward and showed the backyard. Green grass, plastic tablecloths, people frozen in mid-breath. The smell of frosting and cut fruit came through. Now, Rachel said. They moved to the center together. The father took both their hands. Their fingers were strong and warm. He could feel calluses from bowstrings and work. Rebecca nodded once. Rachel nodded back, quick and small. They stepped. It wasn't a tunnel. It was a drop through nothing that did not want passengers. Cold at first, then pressure in the ears, then noise from everywhere. Not one voice, but many. Words he didn't know, voices that were not human. A high, steady note like a kettle left on. Shapes moved in the dark around them, not shadows. but outlines trying to become bodies. Hands reached from both sides, long and thin, jointed wrong, nails like glass. They caught sleeves and hair and skin. The father squeezed harder and felt his daughter squeeze back. Rebecca struck a hand with the broken arrowhead she had kept. Rachel kicked and pulled. Something screamed close, not with the mouth but with the whole space. Light came and went in hard pulses. He saw a hallway with peeling paint. He saw a night sky that was felt too close. He saw a man in white gloves looking up from a stage set in a burned-out field. He smelled meat turned sweet. He heard clapping and then silence, like a door slamming. "Don't let go," he said. His voice came back to him flat. He felt fingers slide on his wrist. He caught them and pulled them back. He couldn't tell if they were his daughters or something else until Rachel said, "Got you," and believed her. The pressure spiked and then broke. The cold left. The smell of frosting rushed in like air after a held breath. They fell on the grass. They hit the backyard within seconds of when they had left. The curtain was still up. The guests had not decided whether to be impressed or uneasy. The speaker hummed. Someone started to clap and then stopped, confused by the sight of two grown women leaning where two children should have been. The father stood first, because he had to anchor the moment. He pulled his two daughters up with him. They were filthy, armed, and older by a decade. The crowd did what crowds do when they don't understand. They cheered. Laughter followed because cheering gave people permission not to truly think about what happened. The clown didn't cheer. Mr. Merriweather's painted smile slipped. He stepped back, eyes fixed on the three of them as if they were a problem he had never had to solve. He swayed once. Color drained under the paint. The father moved toward him. Rebecca and Rachel moved with him without talking about it. The guests thought it was a part of the act and they kind of just watched. The clown lifted one hand as if to tip an imaginary hat. The hand shook. He turned, pushed through a line of parents, and flicked his wrist. A slit opened in the air in front of him. No curtain, no frame, just a wet slice that showed gray and a shoreline behind it. He stepped through the seam without looking back, and the seam closed like a pulled zipper. The father reached the spot and hit empty air. He grabbed at nothing and came up with only the smell of salt. He looked at his daughters. They looked back, breathing hard, eyes steady. The yard roared again. Cheers, questions, phones up, and someone said, "That was amazing." Someone else asked where the twins had gotten the costumes, or where the twins had gone off to. Inside, the father said to his family, low and firm, "Now." They went. Husband, wife, and twin girls. Behind them, the crowd cheered for a finale they thought they had seen. Ahead of them was a kitchen with running water, a light that turned on when you flipped a switch, and a long talk none of them were ready to have yet.